In the mid-1880s, the city of Austin, Texas, was gripped by a quiet dread that crept through its lamplit streets and wooden alleys. The Servant Girl Annihilator became the whispered name for an unknown figure who moved unseen through the humid nights, leaving behind a trail of fear and unanswered questions. At the time, Austin was a growing frontier town, its population swelling with merchants, laborers, and domestic workers who kept the homes of the city's more prosperous families. Gas lights flickered along dusty roads, and the sound of horse hooves echoed against the limestone buildings that lined Congress Avenue. Life followed a steady rhythm: church bells, market chatter, the clatter of wagons, until that rhythm was broken by violence that seemed to strike without pattern or mercy. The victims were often women employed as servants, attacked in their quarters or near the homes where they worked. The assaults came suddenly, often in the deep hours before dawn, when the city's watchmen were few and the air was still. Residents began to bar their doors, reinforce shutters, and keep lamps burning through the night. The fear was not only of the crimes themselves, but of the mystery surrounding them. No one knew who might be next, or why the killer seemed to choose his victims at random. Newspapers began to report the incidents with growing alarm, their language cautious yet urgent, reflecting a city struggling to understand what was happening within its own boundaries. The sense of safety that had once defined Austin's small-town character began to erode, replaced by an uneasy vigilance that touched every household. When the first bodies were discovered, the response was immediate but uncertain. Constables and local physicians arrived with lanterns and notebooks, their boots sinking into the damp soil as they examined the scenes by flickering light. The homes were modest, small servant quarters behind larger residences, often separated by narrow yards or wooden fences. Investigators noted footprints in the mud, impressions of a man's boot, and sometimes the faint trace of a struggle. Neighbors gathered at a distance, whispering as officers marked the ground with chalk and collected what they could find: torn fabric, a dropped tool, a trail leading toward the alley. The city marshal ordered additional patrols, though resources were thin and communication slow. There were no telephones, no central dispatch, only messengers on horseback and the ringing of a bell to summon help. The victims were laid out carefully, examined by candlelight in the small rooms of the local infirmary. Doctors recorded their observations in neat handwriting, noting the similarities between cases that suggested a single hand behind the attacks. As word spread, employers began escorting their servants home, and some families offered to let them sleep indoors rather than in detached quarters. The city's nights grew quieter, but the silence carried tension rather than peace. Each new discovery deepened the sense that something unprecedented was unfolding, something that the modest police force of Austin was ill-equipped to confront. The investigation that followed was methodical by the standards of its time, though limited by the tools available in the 1880s. Officers canvassed neighborhoods, questioning employers, neighbors, and anyone who might have seen a stranger lingering near the servant quarters. They recorded statements in ledgers, comparing details by lamplight in the marshal's office. Bloodstains were examined by sight alone, as no chemical testing yet existed to confirm their origin. Footprints were measured with rulers and traced onto paper, then compared to boots confiscated from suspects. The city council authorized rewards for information, and handbills were posted at markets and railway stations. Citizens formed volunteer patrols, walking the streets with lanterns and rifles, their shadows stretching long across the dirt roads. Fear reshaped daily life. Curfews were informally observed, and women traveling after dark were often accompanied by relatives or trusted friends. Churches held evening vigils, praying for safety and for the capture of whoever was responsible. Reporters from nearby towns arrived to document the story, describing Austin as a city under siege. Yet, despite the scrutiny, the killer remained invisible. Each new attack seemed to mock the efforts of law enforcement, occurring in different parts of town, with no clear pattern beyond the choice of vulnerable victims. The marshal's men began keeping detailed maps of the incidents, marking locations with pins and noting dates, trying to find a rhythm in the chaos. But the lines and circles on the map offered no answers. only a growing sense of helplessness. As months passed, the case evolved into one of the earliest examples of a citywide manhunt in American history. Dozens of suspects were questioned, including laborers, drifters, and even acquaintances of the victims, but none could be definitively linked to the crimes. Some were held briefly, then released when evidence failed to materialize. The press speculated about motives, robbery, revenge, madness, but officials avoided public theories, wary of inflaming panic. Rumors spread that the killer might be a skilled tradesman, someone who moved easily between households without drawing suspicion. Others believed he was an outsider, passing through under cover of night. The city marshal coordinated with neighboring jurisdictions, sending descriptions by telegraph and requesting reports of similar crimes, but no clear connection emerged. As winter turned to spring, the attacks abruptly ceased. No arrest, no confession, no final confrontation marked the end, only silence. The sudden stop was as unsettling as the violence itself. Residents wondered whether the killer had died, fled, or simply chosen to disappear. In the absence of closure, speculation filled the void, and the legend of the Servant Girl Annihilator began to take shape. Writers and historians would later note how the case foreshadowed the pattern of later serial crimes, though at the time, the term serial killer did not yet exist. For Austin's citizens, it was simply terror without explanation. In the years that followed, the memory of those nights lingered in Austin's collective consciousness. The city grew rapidly, its frontier edges giving way to brick buildings, electric lights, and the hum of progress. Yet the story of the Servant Girl Annihilator remained part of its shadowed history. Families who had lived through the fear spoke of it quietly, passing down warnings about locked doors and watchful neighbors. Historians revisited the case, comparing it to later crimes across the Atlantic, noting eerie similarities, but finding no definitive link. The victims, many of them working women whose names faded from public record, became symbols of a time when safety could vanish overnight. Their stories remind us of how communities respond to fear, with vigilance, with rumor, with resilience. The case remains unsolved, its evidence long lost to time, its perpetrator never identified. Yet the mystery endures, preserved in old newspaper clippings and city archives, a reminder of how fragile order can be. Even now, when the streets of Austin are bright with neon and music, the echoes of that earlier darkness still seem to whisper through its history, a quiet testament to lives interrupted and questions that will never be answered.